We are back. It's the Joe Holka Show presented by PrizePicks. It's week 13, and the number one stack on DraftKings is in this game. We're going to walk through 49ers, Eagles, and build a lineup at the end.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles are just on this incredible run of just delivering games of the week.
Yeah.
Just this gauntlet that they're going through schedule-wise has been really great for us as football consumers and even, fantasy gamers. A lot of these games are getting there, especially their home games. The Eagles home games now are averaging 59.4 combined points per game. That's the highest in the league. That's the most scored in any stadium of the league. And a lot of that has to do with their offense, but like we've seen, like their defense is they've gone through just like hell injuries this year. And and they lost another linebacker last week, and Zach Cunningham, who looks like he's trending towards not potentially playing in this game as well. So it's really opened up teams to be able to kind of score on them too. And it's just created these like really great game environments that one are aesthetically fun for us to watch. And there's fantasy points scored. So hopefully we get another one of those this week. I mean, this 49ers offense is just kind of back, right? Like they had like a 2-week gap where like, you remember, because with Brock Purdy, they went on like they like a 10-game streak where they scored 30 or more points with Brock Purdy. And like 2 games they didn't score than 30 or points. They're like, bench him. We got to go to Sam Darnold. Like the media's going on.
It went pretty quick from like, oh, this guy might be the MVP this year to like, oh, nope, it's over. Everyone figured it out. Like the 49ers are dead. Like, and now it's all the way back to the other side. Just people are annoying, man. It's wild.
It's just so funny how it oscillates so quickly. But the 49ers have been back to scoring 30 points a week, since they've come back from
players
bye.
Over there.
They also have this huge rest advantage, against the Eagles. Obviously the Eagles and the Eagles just played 92 snaps on defense in that game. So you got this 49ers team offense that hasn't played since Thanksgiving against the defense that's not only banged up, but literally was on the field for a game and a half worth of plays. So it does set up for an opportunity here for like this 49ers offense to have some success. And that, you start with Brock Purdy. And you just look at the Eagles, a very weird defense in terms of outcomes, right? So they've allowed the QB1 or the QB2 in 3 of their past 4 games. Sam Howell had 31 points against them. Dak had 28.4. Josh Allen just had 40 against them. And then the 2 players sandwiching those games were Patrick Mahomes, who you can argue could have gotten there if his receivers held on to a few balls. And then Tua Tagovailoa only had 10 points against them. Yep. Very weird results here, giving them. But overall, on a per play basis, the Eagles pass defense is not bad. They're only allowing 6.6 yards per pass attempt, but they face the most passing attempts per game in the league at 41.5. The interesting thing about that is the 49ers are more of a volume or efficiency over volume team. Brock Purdy has only thrown the ball more than 31 times this season because when he throws the ball, he's completing 70% of his passes and they're going for 11 yards per pass attempt.
Right.
So like you don't get to run up a lot of passing volume when the throws you do have are so efficient. So it's going to be a really interesting matchup from that stance. I think Purdy will probably be the guy people get to the most around builds of this game just because of the salary he allows. He allows you to get to an AJ Brown if you want to do an AJ Brown, or if you just want to go in a different fashion and get like still Tyreek with some of your 49ers players. Purdy gives you that option more than Jalen Hurts does. We did see Jalen Hurts be a lot more mobile last week. He looked the best he's looked in probably a month running the football since 100%. He's had that knee injury and he's run that brace since he had that brace, because we started to see 2 weeks in a row now, he's had non-tush push touchdowns,
right?
Where he's getting these longer runs, and those are what we were kind of missing this year. His rushing is still way down compared to last year, but we've been living on those tush push touchdowns, and he's going through another hell game again. He has faced the Jets, he has faced the Chiefs, and he has faced the Cowboys. And the 49ers are 5th in the NFL in passing points allowed per game to quarterbacks as well. In those games, outside of the Cowboys games, he was not really an effective passer. And, he had 150 passing yards and 0 touchdowns against the Chiefs, but still was the QB10 because of the rushing equity. So if we can just keep getting these rushing touchdowns, he's getting there. But I do think with Jalen Hurts, he's more of a tournament play than a cash game play because of that. Like if we just run into one of these games where he doesn't have a rushing touchdown and it happens to be in this matchup and we don't get that front end passing, then maybe he ends up not matching the salary that we kind of want. So I think he's more of a tournament play, but he's definitely on the board too. But I think that's where people are going to be looking at it when they start both of these quarterbacks and kind of looking at it. It's just like the salary Purdy gives you.
Yeah, throwing it on screen right now. Exactly what Reeves is talking about. Those longer rushing touchdowns. We got that from Hertz last week. So this was just an image that I threw on the giveaways that we did this past week over on Twitter. $650 of profit back to the community over there. So make sure you guys turn notifications on Twitter in particular, just because I'm going to start doing these flash giveaways where it's only going to be available to people that like these posts within the first 30 minutes. So probably the only way to effectively get involved in those is to turn notifications on Twitter. So make sure you guys check that out if you want the newsletter and some of these picks dropped right to your email. Link in the description for prop drop. We are at 81% on the early week prop drop, the way too early prop drop in particular that goes out on Wednesdays. So that's been a lot of fun. And then overall, we are now 122 and 69 since we started this newsletter in week 6. So pretty happy with that. Hopefully you guys will check it out. Reeves, I think kind of what you're saying and what's kind of exciting, honestly, about Purdy in particular is that normally we get this efficiency, obviously, right? But the volume is kind of a little bit of the concern for him getting to that like epic ceiling, right? But what the Eagles do, it's not necessarily their defense, is just like force people to pass a lot more because they're scoring on the other side as well. So like maybe we get like this combination of efficiency and volume from Purdy, which I mean, with these weapons, has to be an amazing spot to be. Is that kind of what you're saying? If I was to dumb it down a little bit for people like me?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like the crux of it. And like I said, I do think that the rest advantage and the state of where the Eagles defense is definitely creates an advantageous, outlook. I mean, the 49ers are favored in this game, which is, probably shocking to a lot of people.
Slap the face probably to the Eagles fans, right? Like for them not to be favored in this game.
But maybe I do think if it was the inverse, the other way around, if it would be almost like a trap style. Like you'd have a lot of action, I think, on the 49er side. If the Eagles were laying 2.5, I think you would see a ton of action because of all the things that I talked about, the rest advantage, the injuries the Eagles have had. Okay. So, I mean, listen, I'm probably not going to bet this game. No, we'll see. I don't know. Maybe. But I do think if it was set the other way, you would see a lot of money on the 49er side.
Okay. Well, we talked about this in the other video, or I skipped over it, that we would talk a little bit about Brandon Ayuk on the San Francisco side. So let's start with him on the that side of the ball and why you like his matchup this week.
Yeah, I mean, really with Brandon Ayuk, like all we're hoping for is volume, right? Like to let the world know how just tremendous of a wide receiver he is. I honestly think he's easily a top 10 wide receiver from a talent perspective right now in the NFL. And people don't know because he's in this 49ers offense where he doesn't necessarily get a lot of targets. I mean, last week he had just 4 targets. The 4th time over his past 5 games, he's had 6 or fewer targets. He's second in the NFL in yards per route run behind Tyreek Hill. He's playing 83% of his snaps on the outside, and that's where we have targeted the Eagles all season. I had 100% Gabe Davis last week because of this. Shout out. They're allowing a league high 28.2 PPR points per game to outside wide receivers. They're allowing 9.6 receptions per game to outside wide receivers. That's 30th in the NFL. A league high 7.7% touchdown rate to those outside wide receivers. Also, the Eagles dabble in playing a lot more aggressive defense this year. They're playing 32% man coverage. That's 7th in the NFL. And Brandon Ayuk is just absolutely eviscerated man coverage. He's got 30% of the 49ers team targets when the Brock Purdy sees man coverage. He's averaging 4.2 yards per route run, and 3 of his 4 receiving touchdowns this season have come against man coverage. So there's definitely an opportunity if we're going to get some passing volume and some spike, the matchup to kind of illuminate that, hey, Brandon Ayuk can ball, and we might actually get some targets for him this week.
Yeah, this is another one that I consider on the way too early drop, 61.5 receiving yards for Brandon Ayuk. I think that one's a pretty solid over to attack. Again, didn't make it to the newsletter, but this is one, if you're watching this video, that will throw you a little alpha on that. George Kittle, he's the one that's probably going to ruin my entire week if he goes nuts, because it's really difficult to get in some of these Miami guys with Kittle in particular. But anything else on the San Francisco side that you want to touch on before we move on to some of the Eagles guys?
Yeah, and just not to say like, hey, Christian McCaffrey, because we know that Christian McCaffrey has multiple ways to get there, but he's going to be really interesting on this slate coming into Sunday just to see what the delta is between him and Tyreek Hill's ownership.
Dude, he's going to be like 20% if I had to guess. I think that Tyreek might double him in small field, don't you think?
Yeah, so that's going to be very interesting because we've seen this Eagles team now the past 2 weeks start to give up some production to running backs. And what particularly worries me about this is if you saw Buffalo attacked the Eagles linebackers, and they said Nakobe Dean's on injured reserve. Zach Cunningham left last week's game, couldn't even get that out, with a hamstring injury. He hasn't practiced yet to this point. And James Cook dropped a potentially long touchdown too, it right through his arms. But the Bills attacked the Eagles linebackers in the passing game with their running backs. The 49ers have a pretty good receiving running back. I don't know if we know about this. So, I mean, Christian McCaffrey to me seems like a guy. We built a Tyreek Hill lineup on the last video that you could check out. So I think we might do a Christian McCaffrey one here.
Ooh, that'd be fun. Yeah, it's like one of those situations where you look at his ownership, you're like, oh, 20%, like he's not like that sneaky for tournaments, but he might provide like a ton of leverage just because your roster is not going to have Tyreek Hill on it probably. So I'm with you on that.
It's going to be really hard to play both of those guys this week too.
Very difficult. Like it's just not going to project well, right? It doesn't mean you can't do it. It's just not going to project well. So I used to be team just like jam in. So these stars and scrubs type of lineups, depending on the slate. But yeah,
it might be that this week.
It could be. It could, yeah, maybe those are the two guys, and then the rest of it doesn't matter. That could be, but Eagles side of the ball, do you have any like big priorities over there in this game?
I think it comes down to the two wide receivers, and that's assuming we still have Dallas Goedert held out another week. The word is Goddard's pushing to try to play Sunday, but that the team wants him to go a full 4 weeks sitting out based on his injury, so then hold him out one more game. So follow that into the 11th hour. But obviously, if we don't get Dallas Goedert, it's been just we have a 2-year sample now, where it's just been a tremendous boost for Devontae Smith. He now has run 101 routes this season with Goddard off the field, and he's been targeted on 27% of those routes. With Goddard on the field, 15.5%, and something that goes back to last year. With Goddard off the field, Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown have combined for 63% of the team targets. So that means 2/3 of the time, basically, the Eagles drop back to pass. They're throwing to one of these two players. That makes it real great for us, right? The problem is that, we can't do CMC, AJ Brown, plus Devontae Smith, plus Brandon. Like, you just can't do it. It's just, it's impossible. But I do think that we could have a situation too, while Devontae Smith has been hot, depending on the 49ers want to approach this. And listen, I don't know how the 49ers are going to defend the Eagles here, because we saw them go to something they haven't done yet this season, and they had Charvarius Ward shadow DK Metcalf. And if you watch the Thanksgiving video, I'd owe a mea culpa to Charvarius Ward. He balled his ass off on Thanksgiving, probably the best game of his career with the 49ers. He absolutely nuked DK Metcalf, shut him down. It was awesome. But if the 49ers still want to just run him in like isolation coverage with A.J. Brown, I mean, I'm going to take my chances with A.J. Brown. If they don't, and they revert back to kind of playing the coverage structure that they were before that game, I mean, they still were allowing the most receptions per game to outside wide receivers. They're also a team that plays a lot of quarters, a lot of cover 4 in the NFL, third highest rate in the NFL against cover 4. A.J. Brown leads the Eagles with 32.8% of team targets and 60% of their air yards. 49ers also play structurally a lot of cover 3 when they're playing zone outside of cover 4. And A.J. Brown leads the team with 32% of the targets and 53% of the air yards against that coverage as well. So I do think it could be a nice sneaky bounce back week 2 for A.J. Brown. And he's probably a guy that's not going to draw like really any interest because of where Tyreek Hill's priced and where kind of Devontae Smith has been hitting the last couple weeks.
Yeah, honestly, Reeves, AJ Brown could be like sub 5% in tournaments just because it's much tougher to get to at his price point. But I'm with you. AJ Brown, third in weighted opportunity rating this year. So that's a metric that I kind of look at from a DFS perspective. It's a mixture of target market share of air yards. So getting volume, but also getting valuable targets downfield. So totally with you. I think we've identified a couple really nice leverage options for this slate in this game that I really like too. So let's go ahead and build a lineup, Reeves. From a defense perspective, we talked about in the other video, I think a lot of people are just going to pay up for the Falcons against the Jets. The Buccaneers at 3,600, I think will be popular as well. But I kind of like the other side of that game if we want something super cheap. Panthers at 2,500. So going to slot them in there as our placeholder. I do have McCaffrey and Ayuk on this team, Reeves. So do we want to go with Purdy or do we want to try and make something work with Hurts?
I mean, since we're going to McCaffrey, we probably have to play Purdy, just because I don't think we're going to have salary to do anything else. Okay. Because I assume you put Zach Moss in here.
That was going to be my next move. Yeah, so Zach Moss.
I mean, you kind of have to. Can we fit AJ Brown? Can we try it?
We could maybe try it. Yeah. So I guess what people are saying, like playing chalk versus not playing chalk, I think what the Sims have taught us more than anything, if you've been messing around with some of those tools, is that like basically getting a couple of these really good plays in your lineup doesn't nuke your EV. If anything, it helps you get to some of these other expensive players. So I think at times I've probably been a little bit too contrarian in smaller field for sure. So totally fine with Zach Moss at 4,600 for a build.
Well, like in this lineup, particularly if we don't have any Dolphins, It's going to
Right.
be a different
Exactly.
type of Zach Moss lineup.
Yep. If we did AJ Brown, we need 3,900 the rest of the way. So we would need a very cheap tight end, and then we talked about a couple cheaper wide receivers. So we might be able to make this work, stars and scrubs.
Yeah. So can we do Juwan?
Yep.
And like we said, there's going to be, you have to follow this until Sunday, but we do have like kind of like little pocket of Elijah Moore, Greg Dortch, maybe Tyquan Thornton, guys you can get to at the A.T. Perry at that $3,000 to $3,500 range. So if you want to do, just put Dortch is the most expensive guy, so put him in just to show people. Cool. So you can just show people like, hey, this is. But if they need to, you could save a couple hundred on Elijah Moore, then you can save a couple hundred more on A.T. Perry.
Perfect.
So that just gives you kind of the flexibility. And what does that leave us then?
4,700 in the flex. So not the easiest range for sure, but doable if you wanted to package two of those wide receivers that we wanted to kind of get in there. Yeah, there's just a ton of injuries in this range. So if you still would have room for Demario Douglas if you wanted him. You could pay up a little bit more at defense and get one of these other wide receivers in. So
so you can go up on defense if you wanted to. You could do some things like you could even maybe take a shot like we've kind of mentioned, maybe Jeff Wilson if Achane doesn't play, he could be an interesting kind of guy. I don't know if anyone's gonna get the Jerry Jeudy, but I see him. He's kind of floating around there too.
Yeah. Let's leave that slot for the people to figure out, because I think that this is one in particular that you should be watching those injuries.
Also, just for grins, real quick, if you flipped AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, what would just to see the pocket of player you had?
So that would get us 6,200. So then we back into some of these running backs that we like. We could get Kittle on this team if we wanted to overstack it. It allows us to get to your boy Singletary, who we talked about in another video. Gets you Javonte Williams. That's a much better range for sure.
So at least people can see like there actually is some flexibility here.